So a few people have asked me about the Pine motion controller, which is a smart motion controller, and to do a run through of the device. That's something I'll put up shortly. The reason that I haven't is actually because in my scenario I'm using a custom motor controller that I'm planning on finishing off this weekend. And so at the moment, I actually don't have a rig set up to use this. So I've got the motors. So I've got, I'll put this out of the way, that one up there. I've got two different types of motors that I plan on using. So I've got a worm gear motor and a planary style gearbox stepper motor. So it's a pretty much the same motor, it's just the gearings change. And the gearings basically achieve different functions. So the worm gear motor I use because it's far better handling weight. This one I use because it doesn't need to handle weight as much, and it'll be better for other things, and I may run my own worm gear off that as well. So the Pine motor controller that I ordered comes with unterminated cables. So it's got the connection that goes to the Pine motion controller, and then it's just got a blank connection. And it gives you a pinout guide. So this tells you which one goes where. And so for stepper motors generally refer to A and A minus, B and B minus. And each of those will have a color code. It may not match the Pine color code, so then you've got to look at these and say, all right, which one is the right one? Which one is the right color? Which one do I match to which? So that's something that I've had a look at and compared that to the Pine colors. And in my scenario, Pine A is red, and that goes to black on my motor. Pine A minus is green, and that goes to green on my motor, so that color matches. Pine B is black, and that goes to red on the stepper motor, and B minus is white, and that goes to blue. So what we need to do is we need to strip this and actually have a look at the colors inside. So all we do is we just open this one up, and you'll see that there's a little bit of a sheath around it that you'll have to pull back. And then there's a, I should call it a paper covering. And within this paper covering itself are the wires, but there's also some string, which I gather probably adds some strength to the cable. So first things first, I'm going to get the string and I'm going to cut it off so it's not in the way. Don't cut the white cable though, because we will need that. So I've got the string, just cut that off so it's not going to make my life any harder than it needs to be. So now I've got my colours. I only need red, green, black and white on Pine. So I'm going to get rid of blue, and there's also a green white in my case, which is actually ground. So I can cut those as well just to avoid confusion. So now I'm left with black, white, green and red, and then on my stepper motor I've got the colours as well. So as I've been talking, I've cut off some heat shrink. And now I'm just feeding that heat shrink over these stepper motor wires, pushing it down as far as it'll go. The reason I'm doing this is just to avoid any short circuits once I've soldered everything together. You don't have to do it, but it's always a good idea. If you had terminating blocks, you could use those and avoid these as well. So now that I've done that, the next step is to expose the wire. Now that I've trimmed all of my wires, I'm now ready to join them. earlier on I did a mapping of which pine colour went to which stepper motor colour. As I said, your motors may vary, so it's always worth double checking. Yeah, so I know red goes to black, so I take my red and my black connections, and I'm just going to sort of temporarily spin these together until I solder them. The heat shrink that I've got is pretty close to the size of the cable, so I need to be careful that my wire and solder joint is not going to be too thick. So now I go green to green, so I bring green down to green, same thing, and you could solder these one at a time. I'm just choosing to do it this way because I find it marginally easier, and again just watching out for those joins. The next one I have is black to red, same thing, spin, 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 spin. And then finally white to blue, and some solder. So soldering on, just going to give these a quick hit just to make sure they're nice and well connected. Same thing again along here. Just bear in mind again, there's not a lot of space often, so you don't want it to stick out too far. Going to do the green now. Solder and fume, depending on the solder, isn't usually particularly good, so that's something you probably want to avoid. And I noticed with mine, this black and red is quite thick, so I'm just going to push that together a little bit before I solder that, just hopefully so it's not too thick, and the heat shrink fits over it. So the purpose of this is just to make sure the connections are good. As I said, you could do it other ways, but this way works fairly well. And so now with your heat shrink, you're just going to slide it over each of these. If you've got any wires sticking out, you might need to just sort of cut them a little bit. Slide it over each of them, and this will just prevent any shorts between the cables themselves. This one's got a little bit sticking out, so we're just going to see if we can spin that over. If not, I'll just get the pliers and flatten it, but that looks pretty good. So now I've got the heat shrink over pretty much each of those. You just want to apply a little bit of heat to this heat shrink, and that will basically get it to shrink. One of the best ways, I'm just using a soldering iron, it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but one of the good ways to do this is also to use something like a hairdryer or a paint heat gun or something like that. You just want to apply enough heat until it's shrunk over the cable and they're not going to come off. And that'll just mean that if there's any of these touching each other, it's not going to short. So that's really it. That's the connection. I've followed the guide that's given, and this you would then use in whatever your rig is. In my scenario, these will be doing pan and tilt. So I've got a little, basically a bracket that a good friend helped me make. Well, really did, I've got to admit. And so this just attaches on, and then I haven't screwed it in, that's why it free spins. And then the camera will attach to that, and then this cable itself connects into the